topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Camping Show. I'm CW Getz.
And I'm Willow Munson.
It is Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. We have a 50 degree, and I'm proud to say this, 50 degree, cloudy but breezy day here in north central Illinois. You guys had 50 degrees last time we talked, Willow. What is it there today in Pennsylvania?
It's honestly about the same as what you guys are having right now. It's the clouds and the wind make it a little cool for my liking, but we're getting up there.
Yeah. Well, he finally made it to the equalized to the what do you call it? The deep south of Pennsylvania.
The deep south of Pennsylvania.
I love
the deep south of northeastern Pennsylvania.
I love it. And I have a little disclaimer here. Just before the show, we do a little level check, sound check, and I got kicked off the signal. It got kicked off the air here. And our guest was saying that they are having some storms roll in tonight. I'll probably let him explain a little bit more, but he may experience the same issues. So just a little disclaimer, if we all go bye-bye, Willow has promised us a little song and dance. Well, tonight's episode is brought to you by Campground Views, making camping easier.
And by Rutabaga Paddle Sports, providing time on the water.
And by Novacraft Canoe, connecting with nature since 1970. Tonight's episode is Adventuring by Snowshoe with our special guest, Dave Hatfield. Willow, can you tell us a little bit about Dave, please?
64-year-old retired commercial airline pilot from Ontario, Canada, Dave Hadfield has been wandering through Canada's remote northern forest since the early 1980s, specializing in trips beyond the parks into the Crown Land. His journeys by canoe and snowshoe in northeast Manitoba and northwest Ontario have taken him on many backcountry routes not found in guidebooks. He often uses the train for access, dropping off in the middle of the bush and flagging down the train a week or two later for the return trip. After being introduced to traditional gear and techniques by one of his trapper friends, Dave developed much of his own equipment. He's designed and built canoes, wall tents, tin wood stoves, sleds, wanigans, and more. Dave also enjoys modifying the design of those items by using modern materials for the purpose of reducing weight and simplifying the design. Dave is a particularly experienced winter camper, specializing in a hot tent camping in the backcountry of the Canadian Shield Boreal Forest. He and his trekmates spend most of their time on snowshoes, hand-hauling sleds, keeping warm with a lightweight portable wood stove, and wandering through the pristine winter landscape. A lifelong songwriter, unlike me, Dave has recorded 2 albums of wilderness songs. The first album, Northern Breeze, was released in 1997, followed by Wilderness Waltz, released in 2000. His style is a mix of Celtic and folk, consisting of songs written from personal experiences of being there, deeply rooted in the land of its people. Dave's latest endeavors include the writing of a book on wilderness tripping, utilizing tradition-inspired techniques and relating to gear, as well as producing an ongoing series of videos on wilderness tripping.
And with that, welcome to the show, Dave.
Welcome, Dave.
Is he there? Oh, he's up. There he is. All right. Dave, why don't you explain your weather situation up there like we were talking about just a minute ago? You got a storm rolling through there, as I understand it. And he's frozen in the screen. It might be rolling in as we speak. We're not sure.
Yeah, the lightning has already hit the wires. Do they even have wires in the backcountry where he lives?
Yeah. Hey, there he is. He's with us. Yeah. You there with us, Dave? Can you hear us? He's having some sketchy video there. Yeah. Uh-oh. Well, I hope the storm isn't you let us know when you're with us, Dave. Are you there? I see his picture. Well, you might have to break out with that song and dance already, man. We might not be able to connect it. There he is. I see him moving. Dave, you there with us? Can you hear us, Dave? He's kind of in and out. Our producer Rex
blinking.
Are we having we're having some connectivity issues.
Well, while we're waiting, we have a comment from Camper 69 saying that it's a little warm here right now with snow and freezing. Freezing rain and rain tonight. That's gross.
Where is Camper 69 at? If you can chime in and let us know where you're at. Go ahead.
Fine.
Pine Martin's got something there for us.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Are we okay now?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know.
Dave, tell us about the weather there. Give us a little forecast. What's going on?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big storm coming through. Rain, freezing rain, all that sort of thing. Going to shut things down for a couple of days. Hasn't started yet, though, so I don't know why we had that little hiccup. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Maybe he's being dumped on as we speak,
I've got you fine now. So
yeah, okay. That's good. Well, I tell you what, we'll start right off here. First off, let's have you explain the significance of using snowshoes and where the snowshoe actually originated from.
Well, that's a good question, CW. And for those of your followers who are smart enough to live where it's nice and warm and maybe aren't familiar with deep snow, I go snowshoeing in the Canadian North, the great Boreal Forest that starts on the Atlantic coast and goes all the way to the Mackenzie River in the Rocky Mountains. And the snow accumulates there starting in November. It doesn't go away till almost May. And, it can get knee deep and it can get waist deep. And if you're trying to walk through deep snow and you haven't done that before, you'd be surprised how tiring it is, because you got to lift your feet up and push them down hard. And sometimes there's a bit of a crust layer and you try and it almost holds you up and then drops you down. Lifting your feet back up again is just as hard almost. And it's exhausting. In fact, if you look behind you, you can see what looks like a whole row of fence post holes in the snow. Right. We got a word for that in Canada. It's called post holing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really, really tiring, and you can't do it. You after a few hundred yards, you're beat, you're wiped. So thousands of years ago, the native peoples came up with an absolutely brilliant innovation, and that is, of course, the snowshoe. And in terms of intellectual accomplishment, it's right up there with the canoe. An absolutely ingenious idea to how to get around in the winter and do all the things they had to do, because of course they had to hunt and fish and trap and do all the things that are required to live in sometimes a harsh environment. So a snowshoe is traditionally made with ash or birch that's split out. You take a wood that splits easily and also steams easily. So when it's green, you heat it up and you bend it around this curve around a couple of different crossbars, and then lash it together at the tail. So that's the framework. It's also got a lip there, like a ski for when you're breaking trail. And then the mesh is rawhide. So they would take the belly skin of a deer or a moose or something like that, cut it into an endless long thong, soak it so it would become stretchy, and then weave it according to the pattern that they like to use, stretching it as tight as they possibly could. And then when it dried, it became even tighter. And then they would oil it with a mixture of fat and resin, things like that, to try and make it waterproof. And this was totally successful. So it spreads your weight over a wider area, allows you to get up on top of the snow and only sink a little bit. And with a snowshoe, depending what the job is that you've got to do, you can get around and do the chores and activities that are necessary to live, both in the traditional sense and if we just want to have fun now.
Yeah. I didn't realize that they were steam bent, but that makes perfect sense. We used to build drums that way.
Sure.
Yeah, and they use ash, and what's the other one you said?
ash or yellow birch, but
Okay.
they were traditionally dealing with only stone tools,
Mhm.
so they had to pick a wood that splits easily, and ash is known for that.
Yeah.
And if they didn't have a steam box, they would keep the wood immersed in water till
Water.
they were ready to heat it up with rags that's dipped in boiling water and that kind of thing to get it to bend.
And
And they were
now, if you made snowshoes yourself, or you're just familiar with the manufacturing process?
No, I haven't made a set myself,
Okay.
but I'm a canoe builder and a small boat builder, so I've
Okay.
steamed lots of wood, and I use a big fancy steam box. But the native people were used to doing this because they did the same. They used the same skill with canoes, right, to bend the
Yeah.
ribs and the
Yeah.
and that sort of thing.
And so when you're steaming, then I'm assuming this is at minimum 20% moisture content. Basically, it's green wood, waterlogged wood.
Yes,
When
yeah,
you're
they would only use green wood and
Yeah.
they'd keep it wet.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is it difficult to learn how to walk in them? I mean, it seems like it would take some getting used to.
Good question, Willow. And no, it isn't difficult. I mean, you can't, I don't know if you can quite get the sense of scale with these shoes. These are tiny. Uh, Both my kids learned to snowshoe on this particular set of skis when they were
Aw.
about 3 to 4 years old. And once, a grown up teaches them how to put their boots on, and there's a different kinds of harnesses and bindings you can use. Um,
Dave, how long is that shoe that you're holding up there?
Uh,
Approximately. Give
not
us a
not
little
e well, the
cross
main body of it is only about 2 feet,
Okay.
and, then there's a tail that's almost another foot long.
Okay.
But, once they learn once anyone takes a few steps, it becomes fairly natural,
Okay.
and within you know, 5 or 10 minutes, you're just walking, and that's what's great about snowshoes. If you're learning how to ski, often you end up looking down all the time at your ski tips and making sure you don't trip, you don't hook on something that's going to make you trip and fall. And with snowshoes, you find it's very simple, very easy. It's a big, sturdy platform to walk on. And so you have your head up and you see the trees and the birds and the signs. And
And the bees, the birds and the bees.
yeah, not too many bees that
Yeah,
time of
right.
year, but yeah. Yeah. So, if anybody is holding back on snowshoeing because they think it's a difficult thing, it's easier than skiing is, and also you're just about always on a level surface too, right?
That's good to know. I had a disastrous experience the first time I tried to learn how to ski, so I'm glad to hear that.
You'll
Hey,
still fall a few times. I mean, you learn rapidly you can't back up because this part hooks, and
oh,
you end up
interesting.
tumbling over backwards.
Interesting.
The tail of a snowshoe is a bit like a rudder. It drags along behind and
Okay.
keeps them from swiveling. You know,
Oh, okay.
so that's one aspect. The harness. There's different harnesses you can use. The traditional would have just been a thong of, again, leather, probably not rawhide because it's too
Mhm.
stiff. But they had a fancy knot pattern that they would use to hook your moccasin in, or a muckluck actually for winter. Here's this one is obviously for a grown up, not for a little person like this shoe. But a muckluck is made out of, this one's made out of moose hide and canvas upper, and then some sort of insulation. And this one has a felt duffel in.
Okay.
And the combination of the snowshoe and something like this is very warm, very comfortable. And as long
Yeah.
as they don't get wet, you can wear them in very cold temperatures uh, all day long. Later
Mucklucks are
on,
fantastic. Yeah,
yeah,
very warm.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to, if you wear one in a puddle or something, they don't
Yeah,
become very effective. But
yeah.
if you're up in the cold, where snowshoes are natural, in the far north, you never experience liquid water till spring. So something like that muckluck breathes really well, and your foot stays dry and warm all day long.
Yeah. So
Later, when this stuff became available from trading posts, they would use it for the bindings and the harnesses, and it's lamp wick, exactly the same stuff that goes in an oil lantern. And they
mm,
would buy it by the yard, and since it's nice and wide and soft on because it's cotton, soft
yeah,
on the boot, they preferred that.
yeah, interesting. Kim Switzer had a comment here about
Okay.
backing up, a flick of the toe, and you can back up like that. Is that how you do
That's
it?
right. There are little tricks that you get used to
Mm.
when you're snowshoeing.
Yeah.
Some snowshoes, which we'll talk about in a minute, probably
Yeah,
are a lot easier to turn around in than other ones, right? So
in fact, I was just going to ask you that there are different styles of snowshoes, and so I was wondering if you could maybe give us list. If you could just tell us about the different styles, and then tell us why there are different styles, or where maybe what those are used for, how they differ.
sure. Well, there are a couple of factors. The first is size and weight, right? That little shoe that I showed you is for a 3 or 4-year-old,
Hmm.
but I'm 200 pounds, so I need the biggest snowshoe I can get. So
You don't look 200 pounds, Dave. You look good.
I prefer to think it's all muscle, but
Yeah,
I
right.
don't know.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
this snowshoe, which is an antique,
Oh, wow.
made in about the 1880s, I think.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
Again, is for a tiny person, made probably by a mother and father for their child. And it's beautifully
Okay.
made with I don't know if you can see these red little pom-pom decorations on it. And the weaving is
Yeah.
perfect and the wood is perfect. And they built this, I think, probably for their kid as a statement of pride in their ability to make something just like you would make a beautiful canoe or boat if you possibly could. This came out of my
Sure.
great grandfather's attic when he passed away in about 1970. So
Nice.
the different snowshoes were made for different sizes and different purposes. But the next sort of fork in the road or species differentiation, if you want to call them that,
Mhm.
is if you want to go in a straight distance, a snowshoe like this is terrific. It's
Wow.
pointed at the front. This is an Ojibwe snowshoe. It's a modern one,
Oh,
and well, I mean, it's built in traditional ways, but it's built by modern people.
okay.
And this one is over almost 6 feet long, and it's what I prefer to break trail in, because where I'm talking about snowshoeing, where I go, there's no packed trail, and the snow is deep and soft, and the first person over the trail, has a lot of work to do to make that first imprint. And this is just terrific to go somewhere. The pointed end parts, if you're in underbrush and lots of saplings and things like that, this
Yeah.
parts them very easily, kind of like a ski does, and you're much less likely to trip. And if an Ojibwe person, and we're talking about someone on the shores of Georgian Bay, Lake Huron, Lake Superior, sort of
Okay.
a Great Lakes snowshoe. If they wanted to go 10 miles in a day to go visit a friend or someone else's camp, this is a terrific shoe to do that in.
That's
Long
the
and
shoe.
skinny, right?
Okay. Now, for your radio listeners and people that are going to be listening to this on the podcast, let's give them a little verbal description of this. This thing looks like a canoe. It's shaped like a canoe.
It is. Yeah. For someone who's listening, it's like I say, over 5 feet long, and it's pointed at both ends. So it's
Yeah.
not a pure teardrop shape. It's skinny. And also, these snowshoes, these traditional shoes, nest as they walk, right?
Okay.
So at the end of the step, your legs aren't any farther apart than they normally are if you walk on boots on green grass.
Oh,
Whereas most
nice.
snowshoes are oval shaped. But still,
Okay.
even the ones like this Huron pattern that I showed you earlier, the kids snowshoe, um, they also nest when you walk. You have to widen your stride just a little bit in the middle, but at either end of the step, your feet aren't apart. So it's a very natural movement.
I'm just going to ask you that. Yeah. You have to
Yeah. So
walk a little bit wider.
the next sort of style of snowshoe, based on utility, is a bear paw or a modified bear paw. And they're roundish. Some like the Mistassini snowshoes from central Quebec, the Cree snowshoes, the Naskapi snowshoes are almost completely round, except they have a little tail on the bottom, and they're called Beavertail Snowshoes. And they're great for if you have work to do and where you're turning around a lot,
Okay.
right? Trying to turn around in those other shoes, the Ojibwe ones that are pointed, is like trying to parallel park in an 18-wheeler. It's really awkward, right?
I can see
So-
it's like a lot like having skis on, and you're going to step on.
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it's a lot like
I
skis,
had that
absolutely.
trouble.
But if you're putting up a camp and cutting poles and tying out lines or putting up firewood or something like that, a rounded snowshoe where you can spin around in a circle very easily is much more handy. Now, these ones don't have any curl to the front like a ski does, so they're not so great for going distance. They tend to hook the snow and maybe trip you, and you have to walk with your feet apart, which isn't so much fun. But for camp work, they're perfect. They're great. You after a while you forget you have them on.
Yeah.
In fact, where we go camping, we're typically building a wall tent, a hot tent. It's an old-fashioned prospector sort of a tent from long, long ago, except I've had mine made out of modern materials, so it's light. And we camp with a little tin stove in there, so we're warm at night. Anyway, we set this up in the bush, and it's not a prepared site in any way. So we make the whole camp on the snow. We don't dig down the 2 feet to the ground.
Oh, interesting.
Because then we'd be we'd find logs and rocks and things like that, which would be awkward. But the snow is nice and flat. So if you can build a camp up on the snow, you can camp just about anywhere.
Yeah.
But when you're building the camp, you can't take the snowshoes off until everything's packed down. Or you
right. Yeah.
immediately you sink down to your crotch, right?
Post hole, as we say.
So
Yeah, right?
something like this, it's so handy that you kind of forget you're wearing them after a while.
Yeah. That's
So
interesting.
that's a couple of different styles of traditional snowshoes, but the real experts, the academic experts, people who study these things and write theses about them, that sort of stuff, they can look at traditional snowshoes like that 140-year-old one I showed you a couple of minutes ago, and they'll be able to tell you exactly what part of the country they came from, U.S. or Canada, and possibly a very small region, maybe even one clan or one family, because they were very specific. They made the snowshoes according to their snow conditions and the job they had. And they were clever, innovative people. And if they came up with something better, it made an immediate improvement in their life, just like designing and making a canoe.
Yeah. That's great.
Wow. And since there are so many different designs for different applications, do you carry more than one with you on your trips?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. And there's a couple of reasons. The first is what we just talked about. I take the long, skinny ones to go in a straight line, and the bear paws for making camp. But where I like to go, and my friends, where we go winter camping, hot tent camping, is quite a long ways north, long past the parks. We travel about 4 hours drive north of Toronto to a mining town called Sudbury, where we get on a train, and then we ride that about 3 hours to the northwest. Just a little local service train. Only got 2 cars, self-propelled, and you can get off absolutely anywhere you want. And then a week later, flag it down, and they'll stop and pick you up. Doesn't have to be a station at all. It's great. It's a lot of fun. You get on board and you talk to the engineer and you say, I'd like to get off at mile 92 just before you get to that bridge that crosses Pickerel River or whatever.
Something, I love Canada. I mean, you cannot do that. To my knowledge, you can't do that here anywhere.
These trains were actually built in the United States. They're called the Budd car after the corporation that built them in Philadelphia. That's Budd. It's got nothing to do with Budweiser beer.
Oh, okay. I was just...
And they were in use until in the 50s and 60s, until the highway system got totally built in the U.S. Yeah. But there's still a few of these trains in Canada, and it's just great. It's like stepping back to 1965. They're just wonderful people on board. And so we drop off, and they bring the train to a halt. You jump in the snow. They throw you all your stuff, and then it chugs away, and there you are in the middle of everywhere.
Real quick, do you know when that train is coming back so you can flag him down, or is there
it has a schedule.
You're just
it's
not
often
stand
late
on the tracks and wait for him, are you?
You make sure you're there early, because they won't stop and honk their horn if you're not there. and then you got another week.
I was just thinking that. Yeah. When's the
Yeah,
next
so we usually, on the last night of the trip, we camp within about a half mile of the track, and then so we're there the next morning.
Yeah.
And then you put some brightly colored packs up the track, so the engineer's going to remember, oh yeah, I got to pick those guys up.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's
anyway,
good.
the point of taking the 2 pairs is, if one of us went through the ice, there's no trails or roads or anything where we are, no cell phones, nothing like that. So if somebody went through the ice, they would have to kick their snowshoes off probably to self-rescue.
Oh, yeah.
And you wouldn't probably get them back again, right?
Yeah.
So it's really nice to have a spare pair. And during the course of the day, it's possible with traditional shoes to break a snowshoe, right? If there are a couple of logs just under the snow and you don't see them, and you step in the middle, you could break the frame.
Oh, wow.
And you can repair traditional snowshoes even in the bush, because they're made from the bush, right?
Correct.
But it's nice to have the other set to wear in the meantime.
Yeah.
So I take the 2 sets. And my partners, they usually take just one, but we want 1 spare set in the camp.
Yeah, right. Pine Martin just popped up. He takes 5 pairs with him. I'm thinking, that's
Well,
that's quite a number.
I would like to take a lot.
He owns 5 pairs.
Oh, I thought he took 5 pairs. I apologize. Sorry, I read it quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Sometimes we'll bring skis as well, but that's extra weight. And what we're doing is hand-hauling toboggans and sleds, right? So you're always in a fight to reduce the weight, and yet it's winter and you need more stuff and more gear. So it's always a bit of a conflict of what you'd like to bring, but on the other hand, what you can pull.
Yeah, winter requires so much more heavy-duty stuff. But on that, we're going to take a break. But don't go away. We'll be back with more of The Camping Show on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV after these messages.
It's time to go camping. Introducing Campground Views virtual tours. You can tour the campground, see the sites, see if they are available, and click to book your perfect spot. Hit the open road and explore the amazing places found in nature. We make it easy to discover, find, and book your site so that you can go have the fun and freedom you seek. Campground Views virtual tours make it easy and simple for you to see where you are going.
A few years ago, someone asked Rutabaga's owner, Darren Bush, "Hey, how long have you guys been selling boats?" Darren replied, "We don't sell boats. We sell time on the water." Of course, that comes in all types. We help people paddle more safely with Rutabaga outdoor programs. We rent canoes, kayaks, and stand-up paddleboards. We sell and install racks to get you from home to adventure. Rutabaga's got everything you need to get you out on the water, like paddles, life jackets, dry bags, and clothing. Rutabaga Paddle Sports, on the web at rutabaga.com. Mention you saw this ad on The Camping Show.
There's nothing like being out there. For over 50 years, we've been connecting people with nature by building classic Canadian canoe designs using the best materials available. We built a reputation on durable, dependable canoes that allow you to focus on what's important, whether that's unplugging in remote wilderness, spending quality time with your favorite people, or nailing the perfect line. Visit novacraft.com to find the perfect canoe for you and locate your nearest authorized dealer.
And we're back with our guest, Dave Hadfield, on The Camping Show. Dave, how do modern versions of snowshoes differ from traditional ones?
Well, completely different, but it's all just degrees of good, right?
Okay.
So here's an example of a modern snowshoe, and it's an aluminum round tubular frame, aluminum for lightness, and all the way around with some sort of vinyl or other plastic sort of deck. And there's an attached boot, harness or binding that you can slip into, and it usually just clicks in place, a little bit like a ski.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a cross piece right here, a crossbar, and the binding hinges on that. So,
Interesting.
yeah, they're very simple to use. And then on the bottom, nearly all of them have, I don't know if you can see this or not, they have a crampon, a jagged edged aluminum, usually aluminum, sometimes steel, metal, gripping surface so that you can go up hills. And that's where these kind of shoes really shine, is if you're mountaineering and or in some kind of difficult terrain where you're climbing hills. It's great to have a crampon in those situations. So the advantages of a modern shoe like this, there are several. And one is there's very little maintenance. In the off season, you don't have to varnish them. If you step on a branch, it would be very unlikely to put a hole through the deck, very unlikely to break the center of these things if you bridge two logs as you're walking.
Right.
And it's very simple to use this kind of a boot. It's just like a ski binding. You put it in, click, click, and you don't have to learn any fancy knots or something like that. So so that's why these have taken off in modern years. And there are many different designs. They all kind of look like this, but people have been experimenting. I borrowed this off my neighbor, and this is a shoe which is a little bit of a
Oh, wow.
crossover, right?
Yeah,
It's
It looks like something from a superhero movie.
I was just thinking that.
well, you should see that guy pull a toboggan. He is a superhero. Anyway, this has got a steamed ash frame, very much like your traditional, but it's got a deck. I like this deck because it's got holes in it.
Yeah, right.
So on a day when it's heavy packing snow, as the snow heaps up on this, it tends to fall through, whereas a solid deck not. And and then with a solid deck, your snowshoe can collect a lot of weight when you're walking. I don't particularly like that part.
I got you.
So this is an interesting composite or blended technology, and modern snowshoes. They're all kinds of fancy colors and shapes and different styles of bindings.
Yeah.
Wow. And what's your preference between modern and traditional, and why?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit of a traditionalist just because I enjoy that kind of thing. But
Didn't
on the other
expect
hand,
that one.
well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you got the idea, the feeling of that. But one thing I like about traditional shoes is they're made from the forest and from natural materials.
Right.
So if you're out there and they break or something, and they are more inclined to break, you can always fix them. In fact, it's a normal thing on a winter camp in the evening, to bring your snowshoe in the tent and fix something on it. This, oops, I'm gonna have it fall down here for a sec. This snowshoe is also a bit of a composite. It's the traditional Ojibwe shape, pointed at both ends, long, skinny shoe. But instead of using rawhide babiche, it's got nylon monofilament. And this is really tough stuff. Doesn't sag if it gets wet. The rawhide tends to stretch if it's not perfectly varnished and it gets wet. And my previous Ojibwe shoes had been patched so much and so often that I finally, I don't know if you can see all these different colors of thread.
Oh, I do see it.
Yeah, I mean, I used these probably for 15 years, this one pair.
Wow.
They probably have 500 miles on them or more. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe even more. And
that's really impressive. Just walking 900 miles.
Well, it just tends to add up. Once you get the hang of snowshoeing, you can cover a lot of distance, and it's just like walking. In fact, in some ways, it's easier to move around in the winter than in the summer because all the swamps are frozen. And if you got good traveling conditions on lakes, you can go. You can really go. I mean,
right.
So 500 miles sounds like a lot, but if you add up all the trips over decades. But anyway, these shoes turned out eventually to be more patching than babiche, so that's why I went to these monofilament ones.
Yes. So really,
but in terms of preference, like I say, with the traditional shoes, you can fix them, right? Even if you broke the frame, you can split a bit of wood out of a sapling, bend it, over the fire, and then lash it around, sistering alongside of the original frame, and that'll get you, back to your car or the train or whatever. It'll allow you to finish the trip. So just about anything that happens to a snowshoe in the bush, as long as you've got spare string and a bit of time, you can fix it. Now, the modern snowshoes, they're less likely to break, but if they do break, you're kind of stuck. I mean, these are rivets. You can't replace a rivet in the bush. Some of them use nuts and bolts, and if the nut comes off the bolt and disappears in 3 feet of snow, you're not going to find it again. So there's not too much you can do with one of these if they break.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a trade-off. It's a balance.
Absolutely.
But what I like to do in my own camping style, this hot tent camping that I do, is to take traditional methods and equipment, upgrade it, in a sensible way with modern materials, like I did with my wall tent. It's made out of modern materials, although it's an older shape, and it helps me, I feel, to connect with the living world around me, and I enjoy that feeling.
Very cool.
Wow. So we're going to cut to a really short commercial break again, but don't go away. We'll be back with more of the camping show on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV after these messages.
It's time to go camping. Introducing Campground View's virtual tours. You can tour the campground, see the sights, see if they are available, and click to book your perfect spot. Hit the open road and explore the amazing places found in nature. We make it easy to discover, find, and book your site so that you can go have the fun and freedom you seek. Campground View's virtual tours make it easy and simple for you to see where you are going.
A few years ago, someone asked Rutabaga's owner, Darren Bush, "Hey, how long have you guys been selling boats?" Darren replied, "We don't sell boats. We sell time on the water." Of course, that comes in all types. We help people paddle more safely with Rutabaga outdoor programs. We rent canoes, kayaks, and stand-up paddleboards. We sell and install racks to get you from home to adventure. Rutabaga's got everything you need to get you out on the water, like paddles, life jackets, dry bags, and clothing. Rutabaga Paddle Sports, on the web at rutabaga.com. Mention you saw this ad on the camping show.
There's nothing like being out there. For over 50 years, we've been connecting people with nature by building classic Canadian canoe designs using the best materials available. We built a reputation on durable, dependable canoes that allow you to focus on what's important, whether that's unplugging in remote wilderness, spending quality time with your favorite people, or nailing the perfect line. Visit novacraft.com to find the perfect canoe for you and locate your nearest authorized dealer.
And we're back with our guest, Dave Hadfield, on the camping show. Roxy, could we have you put Dave's photos up there, and we'll have him tell us a little bit about each of them. And we're running down on time a little bit, Dave. We might want to go through these a little quicker because we do want to play a song of yours that's coming up.
Great. Yeah, that was taken. This is the best way to learn how to go winter camping, is join a group. And this was a group called Deep Freeze, and they still hang out together once in a while in Ontario. And they would just all take the train or and get off together and make a village in the snow. And that was just all the snowshoes by the campfire one day. And I thought it was a great picture.
Yeah.
That's a picture of these snowshoes I just showed you a couple of minutes ago and what they look like. We have to hang snowshoes up if they're made out of traditional materials. You can't leave them stuck in the snow or something will eat them. Right?
Oh, wow.
The bindings and the babiche. Yeah, porcupines for some reason, and sometimes mice. Yeah.
Good piece of information there.
Wow. Yeah, that's the ridge pole of my wall tent. And if I always leave it long, so we have a place to hang up the snowshoes,
Right.
but also it helps to straighten out the ridgepole of the wall tent so it doesn't sag. That's a typical lamp. Oh, this is how we travel on a long lake. We tend to travel on lakes if we possibly can because everything's flat. And if everything's frozen up hard, it's a great way to go. That's 4 guys with different kinds of toboggans, and that's just us being mules and horses.
Wow.
Again, that's an interesting composite sort of bear paw shoe. That's a very clever idea. And that's a piece of rubber just a simple piece of rubber for a binding. That's my buddy Hans. He's a tractor in the bush, that guy. And that's just a normal day hike, right? Leave
So
the wall tent behind and just go wandering off. That's him hauling his load up a hill on what would normally be a portage in the summertime between 2 lakes. And that was a round robin trip. We spent 9 days going, got dropped off by the train, went quite some distance between 2 or 3 lakes, and then picked up the train at a different spot.
Yeah.
That was a great day hike, that one. We had some basic survival gear in the backpacks. We made a lunch at the edge of a marsh, brewed tea, toasted our sandwiches, admired the view. Just a terrific wandering day.
It's beautiful. So after those pictures, we thought we would want to let everyone in and have a listen to some of your music. So let's have you introduce the song, and then we'll give it a listen.
Big.
Okay, the song's called Gyprock Box. And it contrasts what it's like to live in a wall tent in the middle of a world of living things in the north with how we normally live in the south, which is in a drywall box, right? Gyprock is another name for sheetrock or drywall. It's got different names around the country. And one of my partners made a comment one day when we got back from one of these walks, and we're in the wall tent. He says, "It's sure not a gyprock box, is it?" And so I grabbed that phrase. I wrote this song, and it's got the rhythm of snowshoeing. At the end of that day, when you saw the picture of us looking out over a cliff a minute ago, at the end of that day, I was walking back to the camp, and I really wanted to remember that day. So I took the rhythm of the snowshoes. Yeah, that one. The snowshoes in a bit of a crusty snow on the lake, and they're going crunch, 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 crunch. And I wanted to capture that rhythm, which I think CW you can identify with as a drummer, right?
Sure can, yes.
And I wanted to remember that day by the rhythm in this song. Great. It's about winter camping.
The snow falls and the wind blows. There are no walls where the land froze. There's black spruce and jack pine, hard rock, and it's all mine. And nothing beats a trail to travel farther every day. I'd rather have lake and trees and rock than a hideaway in a southern box. There are fresh tracks in the white snow. Where they lead to, only God knows. There are moose and grouse and porcupine, otter slides and beaver sign, lynx and coyote on the go, rabbits hiding in the snow. And stretching out behind me is a record of my own. I'd rather have wolf and mink and fox than a hideaway in a gyprock box. The axe rings and the tree falls. The dead wood frames tent walls. The stove pops and the heat spreads, and it warms hands and it bakes bread. And just beyond the cotton, it's 38 below. I'd rather have lake and trees and rock than a hideaway in a southern box. And I smile when the snow lies deep on my land again.
Very nice, Dave. Excellent, man. I think that was a very excellent.
Thank you.
Song. I love it. Hey, real quickly, we are running down to just a couple of minutes here, so we have to do these next questions real fast. Going back to snowshoes, where would you recommend people shop for them? Whether traditional or modern?
Well, there are a couple of. It's getting harder and harder to find the traditional snowshoes, but GV in Quebec for Canadians. GV is a company, Gulf Victor.
Okay.
They sell both traditional and modern snowshoes. And in the U.S. and Minnesota, there's the Northern Toboggan Company. They make and sell snowshoes and sleds of all different kinds, but not modern snowshoes. They're traditional. But the big American chain, REI in the States, big outdoor store, they sell all kinds of modern snowshoes.
Okay.
Interesting. And what is the price range for a quality pair of snowshoes?
Generally, they go up to about $300.
Oh, wow.
And that doesn't include the boots. You can get away with pack boots. These are Sorel or Kamek style pack boots. And they'd be another 100 to 150, depending on where you're getting. But the most basic modern shoe you can probably buy for about 115, 120, something like that. They're not as expensive as downhill skiing is, that sort of thing.
Hey, real quick, Dave, if someone wants to learn, we got one more question left after this. If someone wants to learn more about snowshoeing real quick, where would you suggest they start?
Well, there are clubs, snowshoe clubs, and I would strongly recommend that you contact those, get involved with something like that, because you're not just learning how to snowshoe, you're also learning winter travel and winter living. And, it's a little bit more hostile. If you get lost in the winter or you try to cross ice that you shouldn't, you can get in trouble, right? So it's good to go with other people.
If they were going to Google, what search word would you look for, or search words?
Snowshoe club. But also a lot of ski hills these days have snowshoe trails. And that's a great way to get started, because you can rent gear and you're on a pack trail and you can ask other people who any questions that come up.
Yeah, great.
And where can our viewers and listeners go to follow you on social media and check out your website and your music?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I have a website. It's just hadfield.ca, Hadfield with a D. And there are lots of different pages there, lots of different stories, lots of music. My music's available there. I pulled it off of Spotify because Spotify, man, it's an insult the amount that they pay. So if you want my music, you have to buy it through me. But we're very happy to sell it, of course. But I have a fairly active Facebook presence as well. So feel free to ask me any questions on that way.
Okay. Well, Dave, we'd like to thank you here for being our guest in the camping show this evening. It was a pleasure having you here with us. And
it's my pleasure. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Very welcome.
We'd also like to thank our sponsors, Campground Views, Rutabaga Paddle Sports, and Novacraft Canoe for bringing you tonight's show.
Be sure to tune in for next week's episode, An Alaskan Way of Life, with our special guest, Chevy Horval.
Until then, thank you for tuning in to The Camping Show.
Sorry, I've lost the connection here.
And Willow Munson.
Reminding you,
learn more,
do more. See you next week.
Bye.
It's time to go camping.